We want to give a special thank you to all of our volunteers, all of you who have been with us for the last couple of weeks preparing for today. You can only imagine the amount of human capital that goes into accomplishing something like this. So we thank you for the medical team, the tech team, the greeters, the input team or data entry teams. We thank you for every woman, every man who stuffed a bag or who dropped off an item to be given. We thank you for just giving us the day, and we don't take it for granted ever that people give of their time. And so the Bible talks about time, talent, and the tithe, and you all give it all, and you do it with such joy. So we just want to say thank you. We want to ask the Lord's blessing upon you. Heaven would smile on you, and that you would never, ever get weary in your well-doing. To each and every volunteer, to each and every household that's represented on today, may the Lord bless and keep you continuously.
Good evening, ladies. And it is evening. It has been a long day. But I am so happy to see each and every one of you, especially at this moment. We have given you a day filled of information, but this information right now is information that I'm sure we all can use, because historically, we go about our day taking care of everyone and everything and frequently neglect ourselves. We put on our cape and we don't think twice about it. And sometimes don't even take the cape off when we want to go to bed. So tonight's panel is to talk about that Superwoman syndrome that we all live day in out and day out, but to give us some tools to also help to manage it, because it's not going to go anywhere, but we're going to have to learn to live with it and learn to live better with it. So I am very happy to be here to introduce the panel, especially the moderator, who is with us tonight, Renee Chanel Fatah, our favorite newscaster from Channel 10. We appreciate you joining, but someone wanted to come and say hello. Where is he? He just wanted to come say hi. Pastor Waller. There he is. He said he couldn't be here, but there was no way he would be out without saying hello. I don't think he knows we see him. But again, I am going to turn this dynamic panel over to Renee, and I hope that each and every one of you are blessed. There he is. I hope that each and every one of you are blessed from the information that you receive.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, and good evening, everyone. And thank you, Pastor Waller and First Lady
It's
Waller.
probably easier for me to watch it.
I always love being back at Enon, so it's just wonderful to be here with you all this evening. And it sounds like it's been an amazing day of mind, spirit, and body focused on our health. So this is, I think, a perfect way to sort of cap it all off. I said I was excited to be here, and that's true. But I have a confession to make. When I was first told that I was going to be asked to moderate, and I wasn't told the topic, my immediate reaction was, oh my God, I've got so much to do. This is November, there's a lot going on at work, holidays are right around the corner. As much as I love Enon, I just can't do it. And then I was told the topic, Superwoman. And I couldn't rush to my laptop fast enough to send a response that, hey, if it was too late to moderate the panel, I'm going to be in the audience, because this is a subject that seldom gets to be talked about in a large setting like this, and yet it's a topic that my girlfriends and I talk about. When I wake up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep, it's because I'm thinking about some aspect of this trying to be Superwoman and trying to balance. So I'm just so grateful that we have we have this opportunity to talk about this subject, and with such an amazing panel. And I'm going to take the time. Normally, I would say, no, we're just going to jump right into the questions and the conversation, and we also want to be able to hear from you. But this is such an amazing panel that I think speaks to this issue of superwomen and superwomen throughout the generations. Because to be a superwoman in your 20s and 30s, it's very different from trying to be a superwoman in 65. So I think the intergenerational information you're going to get on top of everything else is just going to be very, very helpful. So let me start with the panel. Dr. Ogechi Violet Wardo, clinical psychologist with the Ladipo Group. Is that Ladipo or Ladipo? Ladipo, what do you know? Okay, great. Received her doctoral training from Chestnut Hill College in Philadelphia and completed her internship at the University of Delaware. Dr. Wardo treats clients from a self-compassion lens, integrating cognitive behavioral therapy, interpersonal therapy, and mindfulness to help individuals improve their stress management and self-care skills. A superwoman in her own right, she's a wife, a mom of 3 children, an avid runner with multiple records in track and field. Our next panelist, Casey Adams-Jones. Casey works in PR and communications at Johnson & Johnson and owns her own PR agency. She's married to Chris Jones, and together they have a son, Chris Jr., who is, oh my gosh, you are a superwoman, 7 months old. Next we have Dr. Kim May, internist and medical director, Mercy Life of West Philadelphia, a graduate of Drexel University and Temple University School of Medicine. She's been practicing medicine in Philadelphia since 1999. As the owner of a small private practice in Strawberry Mansion, she too is a superwoman, committed to providing quality health care to those who reside in underserved communities, while also being a mom, daughter, sister, and friend to her loved ones. And then finally, Reverend Brittany Mingo, Associate Pastor of the Elevation Community for Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church, Philadelphia native, received her BS in Psychology from Westchester University, MS in Administration of Human Services from Wilmington University, and Masters of Divinity in Urban Ministry from Mission Seminary. She's worked nationally and internationally with several organizations. Her personal testimony proves God has a purpose for everyone's life. She loves working with youth and young adults to help them cultivate their personal and unique relationship with God while developing a sense of self. Superwomen all. And having said that, we're going to get right into the conversation. The question says, is there such a thing as a superwoman? And I think I've just described all 4 women here as superwomen. So, but I think the problem with the title or the definition superwoman is that nobody sets out to be a superwoman, but in doing everything that we have to do as women and as women of color, we carry that mantle. So I guess I would like to start off with asking Dr. Wardo, what are sort of the characteristics or attributes of a superwoman?
Thank you so much for that question. And being in mental health, I usually just want to have us be present, be here. So checking in with ourselves as we begin to listen today. So one of the things with being a superwoman is that you want to attempt to fulfill multiple full-time roles all at the same time. So you want to be a wife, you want to be a spouse, you want to be a caretaker, you want to be a homemaker, you want to be an employer, you want to be a worker, you want to be everything, and you want to give 100% of energy to each of those tasks at each given moment that you are performing it, which then requires a super capacity of functioning for that to happen. And inevitably, because our human body is not built to function at that capacity, that's when the mental health and health challenges result from. So we want to do everything inevitably by virtue of what life brought to us. But at the same time, because we're trying to do it all at the same time, our body begins to respond in the way that it's trying to tell us it doesn't work this way. So that's what kind of superwoman looks like. Within that, in the mental health realm, you begin to experience symptoms. And then you start asking yourself, I don't even know why I feel this way. Why is my chest hurting? Why am I not sleeping? Or why am I sleeping too much? Why am I feeling depressed? Nothing is wrong. I got everything in my control. I can do it. You start wondering why your body is not feeling well. You're not waking up. You're sluggish. And because you are not attributing it like it's to what you are experiencing, it's to what you are trying to overdo with your body. So a lot of times with us women being under that Superwoman syndrome, we actually forget to breathe. We actually breathe less because we're functioning under such tension that the airway, we don't take in as much air, which then constricts a lot of our body parts and thus begins to deteriorate our body, and we don't see it until everything goes down. So I'm here today hoping that wherever you are in your journey, we can meet and get to another level that will be more balanced and healthier for you.
Dr. Wardo, I think everything you said resonated with everyone here in the church. Casey, I know it resonated with you as a mom of a 7-month-old. How would you respond to what Dr. Wardo said, and how would you describe a superwoman? And
wow, so how do I follow what you I wanted them to dim the lights so I could have just like a moment of meditation. It is difficult, and what I have done, so I'm a first-time mom. My son, Chris Jr., is 7 months, as she said. And what I've tried to do, even in my pregnancy, is recalibrate my brain. I think the concept of a superwoman, it is rooted in white supremacy, and I won't go down that rabbit hole right now, but I just say that to say that sometimes we fall into it because we feel like it's what's expected. We feel like it's a gift that comes with the role. We wear it as a badge of honor, when, as we just heard, it is actually causing us to have a higher maternal mortality rate. Black women have the worst maternal mortality rate, and that extends beyond giving birth. And the leading cause is mental health. And so the way I try to compartmentalize it is, one, I've accepted that you are going through grief. And it's weird because it's like, oh, you have this beautiful child. Oh, what do you mean grieving? This should be a joyous time. But for those of us who have led active lives, who have enjoyed our freedom, who've enjoyed our quiet time, our ability to come and go as we please, we are grieving that loss. We are now the primary caretaker for a human being who is just as beautiful as can be, but can do literally nothing for themselves. And so I've just tried to tell myself that every day is going to be a new adventure. And I am saying it more peacefully than I am resolving. I'm still struggling with this. But just acknowledging that I am grieving, I find is helpful. I'm grieving the loss of freedom. I'm grieving, especially when I see my husband going to the gym and doing this and doing that. And it's like, I think I have a few things I'd like to do too. So that's the other thing, acknowledging that, the grief is there and getting through it, and also surrounding myself with good community. I can find a ton of moms who will complain about the new life and the new role and how it's going, but I'd rather find moms who I can vent to, but who help redirect my mind to say, I hear you, but here's what you've got to do. I hear you, but just take one thing at a time. And then the last thing I try to do is realize that every day what is the priority of the day? Everything's not going to get done. There are days I show up at 100% as a coworker, and I show up as 10% as a mom because I have help at home, or, I have postpartum doula support, or I have my mom there or my husband, and I'm just not as engaged with my son. And I'm okay with that. Society says moms have to be on 24/7, but there are times I need to show up at work stronger than I'm showing up at home. And so once I make peace with those components, it's helped make it easier. Not easy, but easier.
Thank you, Casey. Dr. May, before I have you ask that question, Casey, I just want to follow up a little bit on what you said, because when I was in your position in having children, even though I waited till late in life, I don't think I was confident enough to acknowledge what you just said about grief. And I think that a lot of women who suffer through postpartum depression, they don't talk about it because, again, it's supposed to be, as you said, this wonderful experience. So I guess I'm just a little curious as how at such a young age you sort of got that wisdom, because you're absolutely right, just like embracing this concept of Superwoman. I mean, I've always embraced that and said, yeah, I'm supposed to do this, that, and the other. And you're right, there's a real downside, and there's a price to be paid for that. So how did you get there at such a young age?
That's a great question. So the first thing is I hired doula support, and my two doulas actually attend Enon, Ebony and Lexi. So Ebony was the doula I hired when I was pregnant, and she saw me through birth. And then Lexi has been amazing in the postpartum period. And so hiring them, Black doulas are just like a gift from God. I don't know how else to describe it. They are real with you, but they're gentle. So it's like you're hearing the truth, but in a way you need to hear it. And I think they are a great complement to a healthcare provider, because a healthcare provider can provide that clinical lens from a health perspective, and they can give you a little bit of anecdotal support, but they really come in and support you emotionally and help sort of level set your expectations. And so that has really helped. I also am privileged to be part of a generation that is talking openly about how we feel. I think older generations, it was kind of expected. My mom did this, her mom did this, so on and so forth. So it's just like, I'm just falling right in line. But I feel like I'm blessed to be part of a generation that's like, no, I'm definitely going to show up for my family, but I have to show up for myself too. And I think we're in, I'd be remiss not to mention that we're also in a new era where women are excelling their careers at a faster pace than what we once were, and our careers are more demanding. So it's kind of like, if you want to stay in the game and you want to stay fresh and continue to excel, then that's, you have to, for your mental health, you have to accept those things, that you're not going to always show up the same way all the time.
Yeah, thank you. And you just pointed out the beauty of, I think, this sort of intergenerational panel.
And Gen Z is going to find another way to do it too.
Exactly. Well, you talked about Black doulas being important. Black doctors are so important. Dr. May and I were talking about this before we started this discussion. How would you describe, Dr. May, sort of the attributes of a superwoman? And I must tell you that when I think about doctors, I mean, I always tell myself, well, what I do, it's not life and death. What you do is very much life and death, which adds another layer on this sort of having to balance and do it all. So I'm in awe of what you do, just by virtue of the profession, in addition to you're a mom and you're involved with the church. And so talk about the attributes of a superwoman and how you do it.
Well, I believe that superwomen are determined. So I'm determined to be successful in anything I put my hands on. Also, we're dedicated to our families as well as the communities. Being a superwoman, though, it adds many stressors to our lives, and we really have to be mindful of this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. How would you tackle this question, Brittany? And I look at you as being very young, although I've already seen where there's a lot of wisdom that comes with youth. But how would you describe it?
I would describe superwomen as women who are highly capable, but think that they are capable of doing everything at 100%. And so typically, looking at the women who have raised me or the young woman I've become, there is an element of wanting to be a nurturer and wanting to be the fixer, and thinking that all of that, solely the burden of making sure things go well, solely depend on us. And it comes from a good place. It comes from a place of love. But also for ourselves, we're not very honest with ourselves about the fact that even though we might be highly capable, highly gifted and talented, nobody is talented to handle the weight of the world or to handle everyone else's issues and problems. And so I try to tackle it by telling myself, just kind of being kind to myself. I was sharing earlier that when I would talk to my therapist before, I would say something to her in the fashion of, I just wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. And she's like, what do you keep saying it? She's like, what does it mean? I said, well, I wasn't. She's like, but you were doing this, and you were doing this, and you were doing this, and you were doing that. And I said, yeah, but I was supposed to be doing this too. And so just that mindset of like, we have to check off all of the boxes. And in a sense, I think that sometimes we make the mistake of not realizing that what we're really trying to do is to be God to so many people. And so we end up trying to fill in gaps where we shouldn't be filling in those gaps, but we should kind of be interceding for other people. And instead of us trying to be the ultimate fixer, really knowing who the ultimate fixer is. And so a lot of times I have to ask myself, like, am I supposed to be doing this, or should I be turning this to God to do this, or praying, or giving this person resources and not trying to be the savior, because we can't save everyone. So I try to really ask myself what I'm supposed to be doing, and if I'm stepping out of my role because I'm trying to fix everything.
You know, and listening to women talk about handling all of the competing demands and challenges, faith seems to be sort of a common thread that we rely on to get us through. And I guess, I mean, you've said a lot, and I want to unpack all of that, but it also ties in a little bit with the next round of questions that I want to ask around this sort of intersection between not only as women, but as women of color dealing with this challenge and the price that's paid, and the importance of focusing on mental health and dealing with the stresses. And Dr. Wardo, I'd like you to talk about that. Just, I mean, we have a double whammy. You know, the stress and the burden of being a woman, and I mean the joys too. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean to say the burden of it, but the pressure that comes with not just being a woman, but being an African American woman.
Ultimately, we have to look back that the way we function didn't just start today. We function this way because it was modeled for us, and there's an expectation based on our roots, maybe mom, grandma. There's this modeling that we have seen of how we should be or how we're supposed to regulate ourselves. I would say in 2015, I received my my acceptance to get my doctoral degree, and then the next day I found out I was pregnant. I could have taken an extra year to decide, but as a black woman, you want to go for, there's not that many psychologists in the field. Okay, you're a black woman. There's something you're trying to put into the field. There's something there's this need to be trying to prove something, because you yourself have so much of you that doesn't exist or it's not going to do for you. So I went in, had my baby on Friday, went to take my final exam the next day. Why did I do that? Because I'm the only black in my program. I have to keep up a particular functioning so that I don't get kicked out, or I don't get into some type of problem. So I kept on having to do damage control. Every single functioning I had was because I was in the intersect of being the only black. And so that responsibility, not only that as a mother going to school, I couldn't let it be seen what I was going through. You know how it is. I had to hold a face. The next baby, the next moment, went back to school, went for my clinical rotation. I did all those things, and everybody only said, wow, you're so graceful. Wow, you do this so well. I'm like the award, the picture frame of how to do Superwoman syndrome gracefully. But underneath it, I was suffering because I was just the only one. I couldn't let my mask down. So when we are Black women, we are carrying we're not just functioning as just any other entity that is under our female category. No, we are functioning with a responsibility that we didn't even ask for. And because of that, we have to wear this mask to keep moving and to keep doing everything in some level of perfection so that we don't look a certain way. But in 2020, I'm a recovering Superwoman syndrome from 2020. I had to let it go because it was either I went on the grave or I let it go. So I had to, even as a psychologist, I had to say, I had to come first. So I want you to visualize on the airplane, they tell you, put your mask on first before you there's a reason for that. So as Black women, because we're Black, we're always trying to make everything else fine, trying to keep everything else alive, because that's what we have turned our responsibility, that we have that responsibility. So I want you, as Black women in here, I want you to start looking at the responsibility you're putting on yourself to survive in the system that you're in, and why you have a need to have that responsibility. And then we can go from there.
But how did you reach that point, Dr. Wardo? How were you able to take the mask? Because we all, again, hear what you're saying, but how do you let go of that?
Well, I started to look at my white counterparts.
No.
Honestly, I started to realize that no matter how hard I worked, no matter what I did, in any way, shape, or form, it was like it didn't exist on the other side, at least the way I saw it. So no matter how hard I worked at home, no matter how hard I worked as a wife, I realized that nothing was changing. So the only person that needed to change was me. So I used to come home so grouchy, so pissed off, so mad, and then it will rub up on my family. And my husband used to complain, like he would be complaining, and I'll be complaining, why are you complaining? I'm the one going through stuff. I had a baby, you have to stand up straight. You know how that goes when the husband is complaining and so that was so then I realized, to be honest, I was like, he's right. It doesn't matter how much I complain, what I do. So what I started doing is, before I came home, I stopped by the way and took a breath and took a moment and paused, because I wasn't doing my family any service. So I wrote a list of things that I added to my life in order to be able to successfully de-identify as a superwoman. I really had to so I added no to my vocabulary. I did. So, even to I'm African, so when I'm the youngest, it's you can use no in your vocabulary. So I added no. I added me. I added me time. I added sleep. I added my voice, because I had already lost everything in my body. I had nothing else to lose. So now when you see me, I have nothing to lose. So at work, I added my voice. At school, I added my voice. In my home, I added my voice. So because I decided to add for me, I'm the best person you're going to get from me. So I said that you have to add, because in that Superwoman syndrome mentality, you're subtracting. So as Black women, we have to start working to add to ourselves rather than subtracting for ourselves, to keep up with responsibilities that nobody's even acknowledging for, and just validating a cycle and keeping us in the same functioning that the other counterparts are just enjoying their life.
And what's the price? And Dr. May, you may want to weigh in on this. I mean, yes, your family's upset when you're upset, but there's a physical price that's to be paid for this. And I'd like for both of you to talk about the total.
I had an alarm. My alarm was one day, my chest started hurting. I'm an athlete. I'm a track athlete, so I exercise everything. I'm typically always healthy. My chest was hurting. I'm a psychologist. I should know but why is my chest hurting? I've never had my chest hurt. I thought I was having a heart attack. I ran to the ER, I ran to the doctors, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you. And then they're like, tell me about your life, or tell me what. And then once I told, they're like, you're stressed. I was like, oh, yeah, I know that, but, that's not why my chest hurts. And then over time, through my practice, I started to realize women started coming to me, they will be having physical symptoms, and then they will go to their doctor, which I always recommend, and then their doctor will send them back to me. I was like, I told you that. But it's okay, we just have to go rule out things. So you don't need it to get to where your chest hurts, to get to where you are thinking suicide. And we don't talk about that either as Black women in our Black community. So we don't need it to get to that level. So for me being here, I don't want you to get a warning sign before we take care of it.
Yeah. Dr. May.
So stress can actually lead to medical illness. Persons with stress can develop headaches, depression, because being stressed can just wear you down emotionally. It can cause heartburn. The stress hormones can cause increased acid release into the stomach. It can also cause insomnia, increased risk of a heart attack. If your heart rate is elevated and your blood pressure is elevated over time, you can develop a heart attack just from being stressed. It can cause diabetes. When you're stressed, the liver can actually release increased amounts of blood glucose, and that leads to diabetes. Also, it can cause stomach aches, nausea, a weakened immune system, and which makes you susceptible to developing infections. It can also cause fertility problems, missed periods, eating disorders. So as the doctor said, we must learn to say no.
Especially since we're doing for everyone. Nobody benefits if, our health deteriorates. I have a few more questions, but I also want to make sure anyone in the audience who has a question, because again, this is such a rare opportunity to be able to talk about this issue when I know everybody in the room is dealing with it in one fashion or another. So if anyone has a question, just raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. How have you and Casey, I'm going to ask you this question, sort of navigated the various steps in your career, which has gotten you to the place where, you have your own PR agency, you're at Johnson & Johnson. How have you maneuvered that?
So I had a very interesting start in my career. I graduated from NC State University in 2007, and if you all remember, the economy was really trash around then. We were going through a recession. And so it's very difficult for me because I had a degree in business management, and so it was difficult to find jobs that were like in marketing and PR. And so I really started my agency because I wanted to I was taking on different projects, consulting projects for people I knew, but I didn't have a way because, jobs want you to come fresh out of college with like 5 years of experience, still trying to figure out how to make that happen. So that was my workaround. And so, we talk about stress. I would work a full-time job from 8 to 5, and then my evenings and weekends were dedicated to special projects in the field. But what I told myself was I would give myself 2 years, no more, and then after that, I would just transition back to my full-time job because I wanted to be mindful of the stress I was putting on myself. So fortunately, I was able to land a full-time job in communications within that 2-year time frame. And I still kept my agency, but I would just take on small projects and exercise my no when people ask. Because when people notice you have a gift, they will suck you dry for it. But you have to realize, I think sometimes we can be narcissistic and we feel like, oh, I can't say no because whatever will they do? They'll find somebody else. That's what they will do. And I had that issue. I had that Superwoman syndrome for a long time, and I was stretching myself thin. I wasn't happy. I was tired. I was irritable. Everything that we've mentioned on this panel, I was experiencing. So that power of no helped me really lock into projects I was passionate about and projects that had a quick turnaround so that I could stay focused on my mental health but still continue to progress in my career. And then when I started at Johnson & Johnson a couple of years ago as a senior manager, that role really involved a lot of crisis communication and, full transparency, Johnson & Johnson's in the news all the time. So, that was a very demanding job. Or it is a very demanding job, but I love it. Absolutely love what I do. And so now that I've found something I'm passionate about, I'm able to scale back my PR agency even more. So that's kind of how I've flown through my career, just with saying no and being intentional about where I spend my time. The other thing that I would be remiss to mention is aligning with the right partner. I think a lot of, I know when I was single, a lot of my friends were just wanting to get married. They were just wanting that companionship and just, we need to check the box. I need to get married, have kids, whatever. But if you don't really take the time to think through the partner that you're marrying, that will be your demise. And I have a partner who understands, a husband who understands that I'm very career driven and that there will be times where I'm showing up 100% in, for him. But then there are going to be times where I'm showing up 100% for myself and my career, and that I was adamant that I didn't want to lose that, not through wifehood, not through motherhood. And so, we still have our moments of tension, don't get me wrong, but I'm a Leo, so so I'm very headstrong. And so, I try to find that balance between using my voice, as you mentioned, and also scaling back to realize, okay, you are someone's wife, that does come with responsibilities. There are women who haven't fulfilled those responsibilities and that, just doesn't go well. So just finding that ebb and flow is how I've managed through my career.
Okay, so faith, saying no, having the right partner, all a part of this. Brittany, talk to us a little bit about your career. Because you have done a lot in a very short period of time. And maybe even at this early stage, anything you would do differently or wished you had done differently?
Yeah, so I've recently transitioned careers like a few weeks ago. And prior to coming into full-time ministry, I worked in nonprofits and education. And I think what I learned, what I did learn in nonprofit and education is just there was always a desire to do more, and I would accomplish something and I would not reflect on the accomplishment. That's just nice, now I have to do something else. Or just being a woman, especially an African-American woman in education and nonprofit, and being there for children who are marginalized or disenfranchised, you kind of have the feeling that I have to give my all to my students because they live in a world that's unfair to them. And so not wanting to be a disappointment, another layer of disappointment to them, but also feeling like you had to fight the education system to ensure that the kids got what they deserved. And after a while, I had to kind of learn a balance, a work-life balance. And so at first I was really, really hyped. I'm not married. I don't have any children. So it was just I'm going to use every single moment of my life to fight this. And it just began to be too much. My friends would laugh because they were like, girl, you do not have to open up the school. You do not have to close the school. Why are you there early on a Saturday morning? And realizing that at some points I wasn't really helping because I was so tired. And so realizing how to work smarter and not harder, but also realizing how to kind of reconfigure what I thought and what I defined as being helpful, and being able to say, I'm not going to be of any good use to children if I do not create these healthy boundaries for myself. And so initially, like my kids, I was like, you know, I'm young. I'm like, call me whenever you want. Text me whenever you want. And they listened. They took that. And so did their parents. And then it just be like, actually, I don't want you to call me at 11 o'clock at night.
Say no.
You're right. So learning like those things and learning like there is even an appropriateness, because you think that when you make yourself available 24/7 to people, it's appropriate. That's helpful, but it's not appropriate. So it's not appropriate for me to be able to have my kids to have access to me after a certain time. And learning like it's just necessary to refuel. And I find that I learned that at every level. So I think I have it on this level, and then a new level comes and it's like, oh, I need a little bit more boundaries. I need to figure this out a lot better. But a lot of it was just creating healthy boundaries for myself and not overexerting or making myself too accessible during the times I just needed me time.
And I do think that's a gender thing. A man would not have that issue. We want to help everybody. We want to be nice. We want to, and that adds to the stress and the, you know, there's some. Okay, thank you. Yes, I think we had a question.
Okay, good. Hello. Hi, everyone. I don't know if it's working.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay, hi. Thank you so much for this. My name is Veronica, and I've been here all day. I've actually been a volunteer for the event, and I've loved every minute of it. This is a great conversation, particularly because I've heard this conversation before, and I've heard the designation of Superwoman before, and it's certainly, don't get me wrong, it's certainly a designation that comes with an insurmountable amount of responsibility, I guess, and it should also come with a certain level of empathy. It should come with a certain level of understanding. It should come with a certain level of respect, right? Because there's so much that we do as women and as Black women. But what I also kind of feel like is also kind of missing in the conversation, a gap in the conversation, is the role of the significant other or the man, and you know, or even the village for those who are not in a relationship, right? So, you know, we always talk about all of the responsibility that we take on, and it could be for a number of reasons. It could be whether because we choose to, because we have to. It could be because we have a sense of guilt. You know, it could be for a number of reasons. But what I also want to understand is kind of what role the other side of that plays. So the husband, for example, like you mentioned how you and your husband kind of have tension because maybe sometimes you feel like it's all on you, and maybe he gets to go to the gym and you don't. And to be totally transparent, I have the same with my husband. We have a 2-year-old, and it's the exact same conversation. But what I also realized is that I was taking it on, and I was not trusting him to really step up to the role and take on those responsibilities. I would just kind of say, okay, I have to do this. And he would just kind of fall to the wayside because he said, well, she's got it. She can go ahead and do it. And then it causes tension. So my question is, at what point does it become, is the designation of role to be respected versus when it becomes martyrdom to a certain degree?
But isn't that part of the title? And in a way, we can almost, I don't want to blame the victim, but I think part of being Superwoman is saying that, well, they can't do it like I do it, so therefore I will do it, which is letting them off the hook. And having to take on that, you know, I can do this and I can do that. So no, you are absolutely right. That part of the conversation should be what significant other, whether it's your husband, your spouse, whoever, what is their responsibility in this? Who wants to take that?
So I definitely, oh boy, I can definitely take this one. So you are 1,000% right. And one of the things, I have this journal where I wrote everything, either advice that I heard or just what I wanted for myself when after I birthed my son. The first thing up there was, because I'm a perfectionist, done is better than perfect. At the end of the day, if our son, he gets on me about that too. But I mean, when you're in labor for 18 hours, you kind of are like my son. So if our son is laying down at night, breathing healthy, that's what matters. So yeah, the bottles may not be washed the same way. Yeah, he may want to feed him shredded chicken with cream of chicken that has all this sodium. As you can see, I'm going through that right now. But he's fed, you know, and I have the option to provide healthier options that he can have supplementing the amount of sodium. So, just that's the biggest thing. One is understanding that done is better than perfect. Two is having real conversations with your friends. There have been times where I am so heavy, I'm like 2 seconds away from a breaking point, and a friend calls me with something, and I have to say, girl, I love you, but I cannot handle that right now. I am so sorry. I will pray for you. My devotional this morning was about ABC. I hope that encourages you. But I think sometimes we have our own stuff going on, and we don't want to share it with other people because we feel like we have to be God for other people, even though we'll never say it. That's how our actions are. So also with, this is to answer your question of how your community shows up. So being transparent with them, realizing that done is better than perfect, so you're not taking on all of that. But also sometimes, unfortunately, I really think, and maybe you're a doctor, so maybe you can help me. I really think men are not wired to think a certain way. Because it's like certain stuff that it's like you see the struggle, but you are still just, yeah. So sometimes you just have to break it down for men. And the other thing that I'm working on is giving, 2 stars and a wish, right? You did this well, you did that well, and I appreciated it. I really would love if you could ABC, because sometimes when we just come to them directly, hey, I need you to blah, 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 they're like, oh my God, just nagging. I mean, it's just always something, so just give them 2 stars and then give them the wish. And so that kind of open and honest conversation has to happen. I think also we are very blessed in that I have a family member that comes to live with us for a month. So we have full-time in-home care. And so setting boundaries with them as well, because they're there visiting you. So even after the child goes down, they want to hang out and have fun, and you have to find that balance between hey, I want to show up for you. I want you to have a good time and enjoy your visit. But I also have you here to help so that I can refocus my energy, here. So that boundary setting, that transparent conversation, that letting go of perfectionism and that things aren't going to be done the way, we want them to be done. Finding out what's priority and what can, go off as well. Because there are some days I'm like, okay, this is just not going to get done. And if no one's going to die, be hurt, or, if the world will go on the next day, then it's going to be okay.
Yeah, asking for help. And it's not just, I think, in our relationships with our spouses or our friends, also at work. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, I'm drowning here. I'm in deep water. I can't swim. Help.
Yes.
We don't do enough of that. The Superwoman extends into the workplace.
And if your employer doesn't understand that, you absolutely need to find somewhere else to be, because why would they not want you at the best that you can be? And one other thing I forgot to mention is, depending on what your financial situation is, sometimes you may have to fix your budget to where you can hire help. We have housekeepers that come in. I have doula support that comes in. There are other services that I pay for out of convenience. And some may say oh, my mom didn't do that. And that's fine. Your mom didn't have to do it, but it's what I'm choosing to do so that I can get some rest, so that my chest doesn't hurt.
And that's self-care. Dr. Wardo, I think you wanted to follow up, and then I think we have a question in the back, and then we are
I wanted to add that everything you said hits it on the nail. And like you said, there's things that you write for yourself to remember to help you. One of the things that we need to keep in mind is people will treat you the way they see you treat yourself. So I need us to begin to, there's some things like she said, that you have to write down and memorize. So your spouse, your husband will treat you the way he sees you treat yourself. If he sees you always catching the slack or catching the ball, he's not going to know how to do some things you're asking for. So a lot of times, we expect people to do things that we haven't given them the opportunity to learn how to do. Then we get mad at them. So the thing is, we're not blaming us. We're not saying we did something wrong. We're just saying if you don't let somebody else learn how to do something, you can expect that from them. So one of the things I did, I had to be honest with myself of what I like and don't like. I don't like cooking. I used to like cooking. Then I became a professional woman. I became so much stuff. Something had to give. So I had to, people use the word train or something. I had to get to the point where if there's no food, I'm not going to go make food. I'm just going to wait to see what will happen.
What a concept.
Because I know how long it takes for you to die without food. So I really know how long some things take. So I wait. Eventually, my husband would say, there's no food. I'm like, I know there's no food. What are we doing about food? I don't know. What are we doing? Wow. And so we did that enough that he started to realize he's going to have to learn to make food come out somewhere. So that happened. And then the expectation to cook. My husband, I had to allow him to cook because I cannot always. So I had to make sure that I could allow him to do things rather than blaming him for not doing it. And like you said, the way they do it is not going to be like your perfect Superwoman syndrome self. And you just have to get used to that. So let people learn things. That's the biggest thing. Let your husband learn to do these things. Let your kids learn to do these things. So in my household, everybody has a responsibility because I had to divvy out responsibility. So I'm the manager. I'm no longer the worker. So that's
A lot of good information here. I think we have a question in the back.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Arnita DeShields. I'm the Community Outreach Liaison for Affinity Care of Pennsylvania, and we provide palliative care and hospice care services wherever the patient or wherever the person resides. And with that being said, it's National Caregiver Month, and I just want to honor all the national caregivers that are here, that caregived for somebody in the past or that's presently doing caregiving. And my question to the panel is, what recommendations or tips do you have for those that are caregiving for a loved one?
What a great question. And we're actually going to make that, because my last question was, what advice do you have around mind, spirit, and body? And you've given so much great advice, but I would like to have that addressed. Just this morning, I was at the Alzheimer's Association walk, and Orion Reed's daughter, Tracy Reed, has been a caregiver for her mom for years. Orion is in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's. And we had a conversation about what should be done for caregivers. So I'd like for each one of you to take that, because we are caregivers, whether it's for somebody who's in the final stages, or our children, or, you know, our community. So, Brittany.
When I was younger, my grandfather was diagnosed with dementia, and he lived with us. And so we inadvertently began to become caregivers. And what we had to learn to do is figure out our strengths within the household. And so we knew that Pop needed certain things. So I had a responsibility. My grandmother had a responsibility. My mom had a responsibility. Even my younger sister had a responsibility in understanding where our strengths were and how we could help, but then figuring out where the gaps were and utilizing resources. I know about respite care, where you are the caregiver, but caregivers need time away. So being able to schedule that for yourself, and knowing that, again, even though someone needs 24/7 care, we're not supposed to be the ones that fill in all the 24 hours, 7 days a week. I was also a supports coordinator, which I manage in-home caregivers, and basically like figuring out a plan between family and an outside support. If they're going to work, how many hours do you need someone there to help and assist? And I think it's really just about balance and about knowing, okay, everybody has a job. Everybody should come in and step in, and there's not supposed to be one person being the sole caregiver of a family member, whether they have dementia, Alzheimer's, whether they are experiencing their final days, battling with cancer or anything else. It really is a joint effort. And so also we had to admit when my grandfather got to the point where we could not take care of him in the home. That's a really, really hard decision, because you might feel guilty, or you might feel like I am giving up on this person. But there comes a time where maybe the nursing home is a better option, and you're not a terrible family because you sent your loved one to the nursing home. You could still show up for them and support them in that way. Just really figuring out, like, how do we all work together and make sure there's no one person carrying the burden of caring for the loved one.
So true, and your family's rare because usually it falls on one person. It falls on one. Thank you, Brittany. Dr. May.
I have multiple roles in the community and my social groups. I'm the treasurer for the MSCP. I have a full-time job working with Mercy Life West Philadelphia. I also have a part-time small private practice. I work on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and in addition to that, I have aging parents. So I'm the oldest, and of course I'm the doctor. So whenever my parents needed anything, they would call me. The sink was clogged, and they called me. Yes, the sink was clogged. The pool wasn't draining, and they called me. The roof was leaking, and they called me. And I have a brother who's in his 40s, and my sister is a few years younger than me. So I really was going crazy. I was, and we had to meet. My brother, my sister, and I had to meet, and we had to decide who was going to help my parents with what. Yeah. So my brother, he's younger, he's the youngest, and my parents did everything for him. They spoiled him. So he really felt like he didn't have to do anything. Mm-hmm. So when we met, he was agreeable. So his job was to take care of anything mechanical in the house. When the sink clogged and other things going on, when they needed the snow shoveled, they needed to call him. And we had to really map this out with my parents. And for medical issues, they could call me or my sister. And that made things a lot easier for me. So you have to work with your family so that everything is not really on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Casey?
So just reiterating, I think it really boils down to communication, open and honest communication about what's needed, how, from the aspect of caring for a child, we had a checklist that we went through to really identify, even down to what food would we have the first 2 months coming home from the hospital. So just that hardcore communication about what's needed, what everyone's role is. Also, we are not from this area. You can probably hear it in my voice. I'm from North Carolina. And so that's where our family is, majority. So I really had to lean on prayer and God to bring the right people into our home, because caring for a child is a newborn is very sensitive. So I really prayed to God about my medical team, my clinical team, as well as the doula support, which is how, and I actually met Lexi through Ebony, so I cannot stress them enough. But just having people who can genuinely come into your life and help you beyond measure is helpful as well. So I would just say communication first, and then prayer, absolutely, for the resources that you need. And the third thing I'll say is, don't forget that you're a caregiver for yourself. I think when we say caregiver, we're like, oh yeah, I caregive for my child, for my parent, for this, for that, but we're also caregivers for ourselves. I mean, the Bible calls us to be good stewards for what God has blessed us with. Hello. So we are all a blessing. So don't forget to be a caregiver. What do you, as a caregiver of yourself, need? That time you need away. And it doesn't have to be a week at a all-inclusive resort, which sounds amazing. But even if it's just 5 minutes on the way home, I think you mentioned before you go into the house, even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Casey. Self-care. Dr. Warder, you're going to have the last word and take us out.
I've already added so much. I think I will speak because they covered all the family aspects, which are all what we need to do. From the mental health perspective, it's hard for me to know somebody's giving care to somebody else and not seeing a therapist. So it's hard because I'm the therapist for my family. Yeah, my mom has Alzheimer's, so I'm the one that everybody can confide in and really speak what they're going through. So that's a big part because you, like you said, you yourself, usually individuals that are taking care of somebody else, their health actually deteriorates faster than those that they're taking care of. So you have a chance of dying before the person you're taking care of. So you have to be very mindful of that. So I really cannot emphasize, we use the word self-care, such a buzzword, and we don't know what it means, but you have to create a self-care plan. With my family, we do where, okay, this person will send them a gift card to go get a massage. If we're around, we'll go out to lunch. So we have like accountability with each other. We have a group app. We do have, my brother does the bank account for my mom. Everybody has a responsibility, but at the same time, my responsibility is also making sure that everyone has an outlet to speak their mind about my mom and about their siblings that are driving them crazy. Just if you can have an outlet to be able to pour out and taking that time to yourself, because again, that person is not going to die this moment if you take 5 minutes to yourself. Trust the fact of yesterday, they were there. So just take care of yourself. Check in with yourself. Since I've been sitting here, I check in with my body every single time to check if I'm tense on my shoulders, I check in with my breathing. I check in with myself frequently. And I ask myself, what do I need? And how do I give it to myself? So it's not always what do they need and how do I give it to them? So the same thing can go for you if you're taking care of somebody.
What an important message to leave on. Thank you so much to our panel. It was really very inspirational. I was busy taking notes. I knew this was the place I wanted to be tonight. Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here.